And since it is noon Eastern, I'd like to welcome Heather Burke to present Struggling in Silence, Students' Mental Health and Social and Emotional, Mental Health and Social Emotional Learning. Thank you so much, Heather, and I'll let you take it away.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining me. Our presentation today will have some interactive components. So if you'd like to participate in those, you can join at slido.com. It works a little bit better if you do it from your phone, if you're not familiar. And then our meeting code is going to be 818057. And this code will appear again throughout the session as the questions and interactions appear. So struggling in silence, students' mental health and social emotional learning. So today what I'm going to focus on is really how students are dealing with some of the changes they experienced since COVID-19 and just the experiences they have in their online classes. And we're going to take a look at, even though we may have classes where we have quality course design, we have strong curriculum, that sometimes our students need these social-emotional guidance to really help to ensure that they're retaining the information and they're getting the most out of their studies. Before we start, I'd like to share a little bit about me. I've been teaching since 2008. I've been teaching online since 2010 and fully online since 2017. Currently, I'm an associate professor of English at Hondros College of Nursing, where I've been since 2014. I'm also co-chair for professional development for Quality Matters Ohio. I am my institution's Quality Matters coordinator, and then I'm also a higher ed K-12 and K-12 publisher master reviewer. So to give you an idea of what we're going to look at today, we do have a little bit of an agenda. So first, what I'd like to do is really kind of take a look at depression and anxiety in our student populations. So first, I'd like to discuss faculty perception and what faculty are seeing or what they think they're seeing within our students and the impact that that's having on our faculty, as well as how prepared our faculty feel to deal with these matters. Additionally, we're going to look at some student risk factors, as well as how COVID-19 has really impacted our students even more so. From there, we're going to take a brief look at mental health, look at the coping strategies that our students are currently employing, as well as the access that our students have to mental health services, or even the access they don't have. And then we're going to take a look at something called the REDFlags Model. This REDFlags Model is pretty easily employed, and it helps us to really kind of identify those students who may be at risk, so we can reach out early and frequently to ensure that they're getting the most, not only out of their classes, but they're doing the best that they can in terms of their own well-being. From there, we're going to take a look at social emotional learning and how we can implement that into our own online courses, as well as the benefits that it has not only for us as faculty in improving our own teaching, but also the benefits that it has for our students. And then lastly, we'll have time for discussion and question and answer. So first thing I'd like to ask everybody, since the start of your career, do you believe that your students' mental health has significantly improved, somewhat improved, stayed the same, somewhat declined, or significantly declined? And to partake in the poll, you can join at slido.com and enter 818057. So it looks like most of us feel that it's declined, whether it's somewhat declined or significantly declined. And based on our poll this session, none of us have really seen any kind of improvement or staying the same over time. And this is pretty much on par with what other faculty members are seeing when we go ahead and we take a look at the studies. So 87.1% of faculty believe that students' mental health has declined since the pandemic. So you're definitely not alone in having these feelings and perceiving this is what's going on with your student population. Another 65.3% said it declined since the start of their career. Unfortunately, only 2% said it has improved since the pandemic, and 9.2 believe it improved since the beginning of their career. So the vast majority of faculty are seeing declines in their students' mental health, whether it's been since the start of their career or since the past few years when the pandemic started. Even more so, 79.3% of our faculty who have been polled had one-on-one conversations with students about their mental health during the 12-month study period. And 22% reported speaking with 6 or more students. So that's quite a bit of students who are coming to faculty to speak with them about mental health concerns. And in many cases, faculty may not have the tools really needed to speak with students in a meaningful way, as their training's mostly in an academic area unrelated to mental health. Only 51% of these faculty members from the study felt they really knew how to recognize when a student was in distress. And 21% reported that their own students' mental health problems have really taken a toll on their own mental health and how they feel and how they're approaching their instruction. Training is limited in most institutions. As faculty have reported, only about 28.8% are participating and 55.8% aren't even sure if training exists. So we do have kind of this gap here. We have a lot of faculty members saying that they're seeing significant declines in their students' mental health. We have faculty members who are engaging in discussions with students about their mental health, but yet at the same time, we have faculty members who aren't really sure how to recognize mental health concerns. Their students' mental health is impacting them, and also they don't feel as though they're getting the training that they need to really adequately address these new challenges they're facing in their classrooms, whether online or in person. Mental health does matter. So with Quality Matters, we often look at the curriculum, we look at things like alignment, making sure there's meaningful assignments, but we really need to make sure that students as a whole, we're addressing that, because we can have this really great, wonderful course where everything's perfect, it aligns, we're achieving all these objectives, but student retention is greatly influenced by a variety of social, cognitive, behavioral, and interpersonal factors. So if our students aren't healthy as a whole, regardless of the course we're putting in front of them, regardless of these learning tools that we're giving them, they're not going to be getting the benefit from them. And we already know retention is an issue. 62.2% of students complete their degree within 6 years. So with retention already being an issue at many institutions, when we add in this additional problem of students with mental health concerns, we have an even greater issue to look at. Students reported higher level of optimism, had higher level of satisfaction with their psychological needs, as well as higher levels of academic engagement. So we know that students, when they feel mentally healthy, when all of their needs are being met socially and emotionally, they tend to perform better in their classes. When those needs aren't being met, they tend not to perform as well. So going beyond the rubric, going beyond what we're doing in terms of creating strong courses with strong curriculum, there is this need to really look at the student as a whole person and find ways where we can address their social and emotional needs to ensure their overall success in our courses. So when we look at risk factors for anxiety and depression, based on what you know, based on your experiences, what do you feel are the greatest risk factors? Do you think it's household income? Do you think it's a student's level of education? So by that, do you think first-year students might be more at risk compared to students who are seniors or graduate students? Gender, do you think that plays a role? Do you think all of those things up there play a role? Or do you think it's something entirely different? And none of these things are really the greatest factors when we look at the risk of students being anxious or depressed. Ooh, got half. So we're at 67% of you say none of the above, 33% say all of the above, and we don't have any where we just picked one or two out. So if we look at the research, what we will see is the greatest risk factors for depression and anxiety are all of the above. So we find that students who have lower levels of educational attainment, so we're primarily looking at our first year students, perhaps even our second year students, women, as well as students with low levels of household income. Those students are at our greatest risk of having issues with anxiety and depression, which translate over into problems within the classroom. Now, if we combine all of these together and we deal with populations of students who are women, who have low levels of household income and low levels of educational attainment, the risk is even greater. So those typically, based on what the research shows, are students where we really want to be on the lookout for. And a lot of times it has to do with those students tend to have a lot of responsibilities they're juggling. It's not uncommon for students to be parents, employees, and students, sometimes even caretakers for other family members. And then also at the same time, they're juggling all these responsibilities, and they may have economic needs that aren't being met as well, which adds to that extra stress. Anxiety, based on the literature, 71% of students polled said they had increased anxiety since COVID-19. So in the past 2 years or so, their anxiety levels have increased. About 38% had moderate and 22% had severe anxiety, which is pretty significant. So our students are anxious, they're uncomfortable, they're not feeling at ease. Depression too, quite a significant problem for a vast portion of our populations. 23% about had moderate, while 25% had moderately severe, and just over 17 had severe depression. And then 50% of these participants met the standard for depression based on a clinical diagnosis, and 41% met the standard for anxiety. So our students really aren't in good shape right now when it comes to their overall mental health. Many of them are struggling with anxiety and depression. And then when we add in extra risk factors like educational attainment, low levels of household income, and gender for some populations of our students, that risk and those consequences become even greater. Research found that students overall, some can cope, some do not cope. So less than half said yes. And problematically, the students who said that they could not cope didn't really have healthy coping strategies. A number of students said they found that they were drinking more alcohol than they had in the past, and they were using that to cope with their anxiety and cope with their depression. Students reported crying, whether they had random crying spells or they just found themselves spending time crying over things going on in their lives that they felt they did not have control over. Unfortunately, students did report incidents of self-harm and even thoughts of suicide. A number of students said they were smoking more than they had in the past, and some students just didn't know what to do. They had no method whatsoever. So they really weren't sure how to handle it, where to turn, and they kind of just took things as they came along. On a positive note, a number of students did have positive coping strategies, and they found that engaging with their family and friends, whether that be in person or virtually, did help them to have more positive feelings. And this goes along with if we have students who don't have a strong support system where they can engage with their family and friends, they're not going to be able to implement a positive coping strategy like that. So students who lack a strong support system, that's something too we want to look out for. Those students may be at greater risk than some of our others. Students found their pets help them, or getting a pet, just having another creature there to kind of lean on, cuddle, talk to. They found it had a really positive impact on their overall mood and how they handled their day-to-day life. Living at home. Students said that living at home helped them, not only because it eased an economic burden that they may had been struggling with, but they also had that built-in support system, that family unit there. So they had people who were constantly around them to socialize with, to talk to about ongoing problems they may be facing, whether it's academically, professionally, or in another area of their life. Other students said they listened to music, and some students said just being outdoors and getting away from everything was a way to really help them to cope and reflect on their emotions and what was going on in their lives. So according to one study, what do you think the primary reason that students did not receive mental health care? So we know students had negative coping strategies. We know some had positive, and we looked at those positive coping strategies. We didn't really see students accessing mental health care. There was nothing there about talking to a provider or talking to a doctor. So social stigma was the number 1 answer that we had when we looked at the poll. Way to go, Chris. Was our only one, I think, who may have answered it to come in number 1. But actually, the issue that many students, unfortunately, which leads to an entire different problem that is way beyond the scope of this presentation or even this conference, students reported cost. So 70.61% of students said they did not access mental health care because of the cost of it, the affordability. And this may lend itself to students who perhaps do not have health insurance. Maybe they do, but it doesn't cover mental health care, or maybe it does, but the mental health care that it covers, the copays or the cost for the prescriptions, just may be too expensive, or students just perceive it as a service that is too expensive. Another 48% of students in the study reported they had limited or no access. So this could mean there were no mental health providers available in their area. Getting an appointment was extraordinarily challenging, where they maybe had to wait months or several weeks at a time. And students wanted the help then and there, so they were discouraged and they opted not to get that help. Lack of information. Over half of students said they really weren't sure how to get mental health care. Where do they start? How do they find a provider? How do they really set up that initial consultation? What do they do once they get there? So students really just didn't understand the process, the benefits, and how to get started. And then social stigma, unfortunately, is something that students said well over half reported that they didn't go because of the social stigma associated with it. They were afraid of what people would think of them, what their peers may say, how their families may even perceive it. So instead of seeking out that help, they opted not to. And I think that's probably something that all of us in some shape or form can really encourage our students to try to overcome that and kind of knock down those barriers to that. Interestingly, 71% of students said they wanted access to telehealth care. And this may kind of go hand in hand with the limited or no access. Students may have felt that if they had that access to telehealth care, they would have been more likely to utilize those services. So with that limited no access, some students may have not been able to actually get to a provider. But if they had the telehealth care, they could see a provider a little bit farther away, and we wouldn't have those issues with maybe transportation or distance. Only 5% of students, unfortunately, in one study utilized mental health services, and then in another study that sampled about 30% utilized it. So regardless of the samples that we're looking at, we still have a low utilization of mental health services for our students, despite the fact that students are reporting in larger numbers now than in the past that they do have mental health concerns and they are struggling with depression and anxiety along with other things. So when you are looking at your students, how do you know, even though you may be in an online environment, how do you know they're struggling with mental health? What type of red flags do you look for? So stop attending class. It's a good one. Sometimes we have students where, they're turning in assignments weekly, they're participating, they're engaging with us through email or even maybe scheduling Zoom sessions, and they suddenly just disappear. They're gone. Sadness. Sometimes we can see that in their writing. Maybe when they're communicating to us through email, we can kind of get a sense of that tone in their words. Maybe we note it in their work. Maybe their work starts to take a dark tone. No interaction. So maybe they're not interacting at all with you, with their peers. Their submissions are late. They're not engaged. Maybe you have weekly Zoom sessions and that student's camera is never on. They don't participate. They don't ask questions, or maybe even if it is, they kind of sit there. They don't look as though they're really interested in anything that's being said. Late submissions, not completing coursework, speech tone. These are all really good ones. These are things that we can look for. And I see that there's a common theme where we're saying that not completing the coursework and late submission. So when we have students who stop doing the work, oftentimes it's a red flag that there's something going on there. They're disengaged, whether it be because they're having some kind of mental health crisis, or they have other complications in their life that are creating issues for them where it's preventing them from taking part in their classes. And then they let you know. Every once in a while, we will have students and they will reach out and they will let us know. And this is where it becomes tricky for faculty sometimes, because you have to kind of tread lightly. How do we respond to them in a way where it's meaningful and we can keep that dialogue going? How do we know if the student wants us to help them to access counseling services, or if maybe it's something they just want to talk to us about? And if that's the case, how do we keep that discussion going, and how do we say the right thing and get them headed more so in the right direction? And then checking email. Yeah, so students, sometimes we reach out and we respond, we reach out over and over, offer help, and they just don't respond to us. So those are all red flags that we can look for when we have our online students and we're trying to kind of gauge who might be in trouble and who might really need some extensive outreach. So the red flags model, this is a model that can help us to kind of gauge where our students are and if they need help. And a lot of this we actually just had in the previous poll in the word cloud. Many of you mentioned things from this. So reoccurrent class absences that are sudden or uncharacteristic of a student. So we have a student, they're attending class weekly, submitting assignments, and then all of a sudden it just stops. And we're not getting any feedback from the student as to maybe there's an illness or maybe they're having computer issues. The student just seemingly disappears. Extreme or unusual emotional reactions. And this could take place maybe in a discussion forum. The student may reply to another student in a way that is very uncharacteristic. It seems very emotional, maybe argumentative. Those are things we want to look for. Likewise, feedback you may give the student. This student may reach out to you with extreme and kind of an unusual emotional reaction to the feedback and guidance that you're providing them. Difficulty concentrating. So this could be something the student may communicate to you, or you may see it, let's say, if you have live sessions where you do have students where you work with, you go over lecture content or whatever the case may be, and they just don't seem focused. They don't seem like they're actively involved. They seem like they're checked out and somewhere else. Frequent display of anxiety or worry. So we may have students who constantly email us, constantly checking requirements, constantly checking if what they're doing is okay, constantly confirming something's due at a certain time, expressing their fear that they're maybe not able to meet the standards we set for them. These are things we want to look at as well. Late and incomplete assignments, so they turn in with increased frequency. So we all know that our students, they miss assignments sometimes. Sometimes they're late. Life happens and it gets in the way. But when this happens with increased frequency, where it starts to become a habit, this is something we really want to look at. This we may not see as much since we're online, but if you do have live sessions and you notice it, or you're on campus and you do get the opportunity to see your students, when their personal appearance and their hygiene really kind of shifts, and it seems as though they no longer care about it, or they may just not have the time for it because there's other things going on in their lives or other things going on psychologically, socially, that's really preventing them from having the appearance and having that care towards hygiene that they once did. Sometimes we just have a guilt feeling that something's not right. And we need to really look into that and not brush it aside when that happens. Sometimes just from reading a student's work or kind of getting a sense of their tone from an email or a phone conversation, we get this feeling that just something's off and you're not really sure what it is, but you feel like that student's not okay. When that happens, we want to make sure we take pause and then we really think about how can we approach that student in a way where we're not overstepping our bounds and we're doing it in a way we know the student's going to feel comfortable and reach back out to us. As well as sudden deterioration in quality of work or work becomes dark and negative. So for example, I teach writing, and I, through writing, get to know my students quite a bit because they write about things in their personal lives. I've had issues in the past with the creative writing that we do where students will write about very dark things in terms of reaching on, committing suicide, maybe hurting others, hurting themselves. When things like that happen and they get dark in that nature, we know we need to act right away. Those aren't red flags that we want to sit on too long or think about. Those are red flags that we immediately want to reach out to counseling, reach out to our deans or whoever we report to, and really develop a clear strategy on how we're going to approach this student and how we can help them. So this all comes back to social emotional learning. And social emotional learning, before we talk about what it is, we want to really think about teaching in our curriculum as going beyond concepts and skills. So those things are all important, but also through our teaching, also through the curriculum that we're guiding our students through, we want to really help our students to develop lifelong lessons and tools that will influence them in every aspect of their lives. So we want to kind of take an approach where we're educating, we're looking at the entire person, not just that academic component. And a lot of times in higher education, that's exactly what we look at. We look at that academic component, and oftentimes we kind of forget about the social emotional component, which you usually see a greater influence on in K through 12 education. So when we define social emotional learning, it has a couple of components, and it involves the student's self-awareness, their ability to self-manage, their overall social awareness, their relationship skills, and that includes skills with their peers, with their instructors, with their community even, and then responsible decision-making. So these are all things that we can kind of work to integrate into our curriculum so that we're addressing them and helping students to achieve these 5 goals. So when we look at the benefits of social emotional learning in higher ed, they're numerous and they outweigh the negatives or the cons of it. So we've seen through research, social emotional learning has a direct correlation with academic achievement, outside the classroom, students' job performance, or maybe if students are in a program where they have to intern, or take a practicum, it has increased performance benefits with that. Organizational contributions, and this can be contributions within the institution. So are they more likely to contribute to extracurricular activities? Are they more likely to even contribute when they're in group projects? Physical and mental health, it's connected to an improvement in that. Empathy, inclusiveness, so they're more likely to try to understand things from their peers and others' perspectives, as well as try to include others who are unlike them. So others who are different, maybe anywhere from interest to appearance to background. And they tend to be more conscientious, not only in their engagement with their peers and their instructors, but also when it comes to their actual work. And it does decrease their overall likelihood of partaking in harmful behaviors. So those things like we saw with the improper coping mechanisms, so the drinking, the smoking, and then risky decisions. So making decisions that may seem erratic and in the long term may not seem to be in the student's best interest, whether those students are academic decisions or personal decisions. So overall, SEL has a lot of benefits for our students. But unfortunately, as I previously mentioned, it's not really common in higher education. So what we see in higher education often is instead of addressing things before they become an issue, so having programs, having actions in place that ensure that students' social emotional needs are being addressed, oftentimes what we see in higher education is that we have programs that focus on these things and focus on the symptoms. So they address the symptom rather than addressing the issue before it becomes one. So there's less focus on prevention and more focus on treating the consequences. And this is actually a problem because we're not focusing on the causes, we're focusing on the symptoms. And if we adjust some of our thinking and some of our strategies, we can work to address the causes, eliminate the causes, or at least reduce the impact of them. And we won't be constantly scurrying to try to find ways to address the symptoms. And this makes for a better overall learning experience for our students. It helps us to ensure that our students are healthier as a whole. And as instructors, it makes for a more positive classroom environment, which enables us to be better at what we do because we're focused on the curriculum and we're not focused so much on looking at students and the symptoms they're having and trying to find ways to help them, get through the problems that they're facing. So there are some things that you can do to integrate social emotional learning in your classroom. And on the last page in the references, there's an entire guide which I cite. It is several pages long. It has all kinds of strategies that you can employ. I've pulled out the ones that I tend to use the most, that I've had success with, and that are more easily implemented in a pretty quick way. So one thing we always want to do is we want to make sure right from the very beginning of class. And if you haven't done this yet and you're in the middle of a term, there's no reason you can't start doing it now. It doesn't have to start week 1. If you all of a sudden start integrating it in week 10, that's fine. But we want to make sure we establish and maintain a safe, supportive learning environment. And we want to make sure there's really not only just instructor-student interaction and engagement, we want to make sure it's positive. And we want to make sure through that positive interaction with our students that not only students feel they can approach us and engage with us, but that we're also really pushing students to take ownership and have pride in what they're doing. And ways we can do this too by promoting a more positive engagement with students is when we do have live lectures or maybe live sessions where we're working with small groups, we want to make sure we're having an interactive dialogue. We want it to be more conversational where students are participating and giving pieces of information, sharing their ideas, just right along with the instructor. We really want to try to avoid that real basic one-way recorded lecture when we can. Not only does that enable students when we have that open dialogue to actively participate in their studies, it helps you to further develop your relationship with them and it helps them to take ownership. And overall, it's just much more engaging than having someone go through slides and just talk to you about course concepts for an hour, 2 hours at a time. We want to check in with our students early and frequently. So week 1 of the term, I check in with every single student. I check in on them. I find out how they're doing in my class. I ask them how they're doing in all of their classes in general. And I let them know that if they have a concern that's outside of our class, to please let me know because I will put them in contact with the right person or the right resource so I can help them through that. And then throughout the term, so once and around the middle of the term, around midterm, right before then, and then right before the end of the term, I reach out directly again to each of my students. I find out how they feel about the course so far, what things they may need help with, what things they feel that they're doing well in, also how they're doing in their other classes. Because if they're not doing well in one class and they're having a lot of stress from it, it's going to have an impact on how they do in my class. So it's important that we get that information, and that when we can, we not only speak with our students about it, but we speak with our colleagues who are students maybe in their classes. So we can work together as a team to really help students get through. And then don't be afraid to call. I know some people don't like to call. They prefer to email. They prefer to keep going through course messages, but sometimes it just doesn't work. So when you can, and when you do have access to your students' full information, so their phone numbers, go ahead and call them. I mean, I do it, and I will tell you 98% of the time, the student is thrilled that I called them. Most of the time, the student will say, I wasn't really sure how to answer your email. I didn't really know what to say. This is what's going on. I'm so glad I can talk to you. It's been positive. I've never had a student say to me, why are you calling me? Stop bothering me. The other 2% of the time, the students just don't respond. And then that goes back to our red flags model, where we have these students and they've just disappeared. We want to make sure that we establish high, clear standards from the beginning, and that those standards work in conjunction with providing opportunities for our students to partake in self-evaluation and self-reflection. So this helps our students really think about their emotions, how they're feeling, how they're applying core concepts to those areas. And then it also, as an instructor, it gives you the opportunity to read them, so you kind of get that inner look into what's going on with your students. So if there are areas where maybe they're lacking understanding, or maybe they're having anxiety over them, or anything else, it provides us that open opportunity to kind of swoop in there and address them more rapidly than we would if we didn't have these types of checks in place. Cooperative learning is great. If you can find a way to do it, and your students are receptive to it, so it works with the student population that you have. Small group projects, even things like peer reviews, group presentations, anything where it helps them to make peer-to-peer relationships and help them to engage with people who are unlike themselves, where they can develop those social skills, they can develop that sense of community within the classroom, is a positive thing. When students have that sense of community in the classroom, it helps them socially, it helps them emotionally, and it can cut down on their likelihood of just stopping taking the course, because they know those other students are going to notice, and they're going to say, hey, where's Joe at? I haven't seen him. He hasn't been showing up to our meetings. So there's that sense of accountability there too, as well as that sense of community. Appeal to varied learning styles. We have this in our rubric, we mentioned this. So video, audio, images, text, all of this can be helpful for our students, as well as active learning activities. So role play, problem solving, things that get our students involved, thinking about their emotions, thinking about how they perceive things, can help them to really think about themselves more so than just the content itself. So it helps them to think about them as a person, how that content really relates to them, how it relates to their peers, and how they can apply it. Another thing we can look at is self-awareness. So explore barriers to asking for help. So a lot of times students need help, but they don't necessarily reach out for it. And sometimes our students don't reach out for help for a very simple reason. They feel stupid when they reach out for help, or they feel that it might be bothering you. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I get emails, or I'll call a student and they will say, you know what, I had all these questions, but I just feel like we were really busy. And I just feel like all my instructors are busy, and I don't want to bother them. I don't want to be that student. And it's like, it's your job to bother me. Please email me, call me. I'm here to help you. So Explore those barriers and make sure your students understand and know that you are there to help. If they email you with questions, they're not bothering you. If they call you with questions, they're not bothering you, that together you're in it. So it's a partnership. You're there to guide them through the content, guide them through the learning experience, and asking for help is never something that they should be afraid to do. With our feedback, we really want to try to use growth mindset oriented language. So we want to make sure students understand that learning is a process and that it doesn't just stop. There's always improvement possible. There's always room for growth. So an example of this would be saying, you're headed in the right direction. So we know if a student's headed in the right direction, you keep going to get to that end result, right? They're headed in the right way. They need to keep moving forward. It's a process. Instead of you tried your best. You tried your best kind of just stops it. You tried your best, you're done. This is what you did. You're not going to go much farther with it. So we really want to think about our word choice. We want to use words that really promote that learning's continuous, and they can always grow, and that we believe they can grow. Because if we believe they can grow, they'll believe that they can grow, and they'll improve their overall social and emotional outlook on the class, feelings about themselves. Self-management's important. If you can, invite successful students back to make videos or even visit live sessions to talk about challenges that they've faced. We can talk to them about course challenges, but a lot of times our students need to hear it from their peers. And when they hear it from their peers, it has a much more meaningful impact. Another thing we can do is share our favorite wrong answer. So we may even want to talk about wrong answers that we had when we were students or things that we made mistakes about. It helps to humanize us, and it helps to break down those barriers and show students that everybody makes mistakes in the learning process. They're not alone in, having these misperceptions about the content or what's right and what's wrong. It makes it much more approachable. And then another thing to do is ask your students to come up with multiple ways to find a solution. This is important too, because it shows our students there's not one single way, typically, for most disciplines, math and some others there may be, but to really come up with a workable answer for something, and then have the students speak with you and with others, whether you do a discussion forum, you do it in small groups or a live lecture, and really talk about the different approaches, which one works better and why. So really get them thinking and focused on having a more positive attitude, that it's not a one size fits all, a one way to do things, that there are multiple choices, multiple strategies that they can employ. And then finally, we want to make sure that we constantly ask questions to engage our students. So whether we do that in discussion forums, we do it in live sessions, we want to make sure our students know that we're there. We want to push our students to really think about issues and about topics. We want to let our students take ownership of their education. So if you can have students lead a discussion or teach back a concept to the class, not only does it help to check their understanding, but it also puts them in an ownership role of the content. Likewise, call on students randomly. This can help with students who may be a little bit shy to speak, or students who may seem disengaged. It can help to improve that. If you're in a subject matter where these issues come up, we want to make sure we acknowledge racism, sexism, and bias in our fields, whether it's a professional field our students are working towards becoming a part of, or just our content area. And then this, I think, is really important, and it's something at the least we can all do, is to choose a couple of students each week and try to strengthen your relationship with them. So maybe you don't have the time to directly reach out to every student in your class, but most of us do have the time to reach out to a handful of students each week, check in with them, talk to them, have a conversation, just to kind of humanize the relationship, break down any barriers that there may be with that screen separation between us, and get to know them. Because when we know our students as individuals, we can teach them better and we can help them to achieve their goals better. And then if possible, it happens, sometimes we need to refer students to campus services. And a lot of times it makes it easier for the students if we not only provide a personal reference, so maybe we reach out to that service first, letting them know the student's going to be there. So when the student comes, they're waiting for them and they can anticipate their arrival, and the student can have a much warmer reception than if they kind of go in there and they're not really sure to navigate what they're doing. And if we're on campus, even walking that student down personally, that can make a significant difference, and it can help students to feel more comfortable utilizing the resources that we have for them. So, time to talk. Do any of you use aspects of social emotional learning in your courses? Do you have any plans to incorporate it? Are there any questions that you have about students' mental health and SEL? And then the last question there, we want to ignore that is from previous. Yes, Sarah, go ahead. You can put yourself on mic if you'd like.
All right. So my main job is working as an instructional technology consultant, and I help the College of Ed, but I also teach a really large biology course. And I was working with people who were doing social emotional learning in the fall. And so I learned a lot. So your presentation was like hitting everything right on the head. It was great. This semester, I decided to be very proactive, and I put in the chat, I actually created a what is my self-care plan, like Google worksheet for my students, and had them fill it out to have them think about, what, supports do I have in place should something happen during the semester? Do I already know I'm struggling with something? What supports do I have? And then if they didn't have anything, I specifically asked on there if they wanted me to be the person that they could, contact and come to for support. And that was really helpful. I still had about 4 students out of 88 that it was just, I couldn't get them no matter what I did. They just kind of disappeared. But overall, it seemed to help a lot. And we also just talked about it in class, that this is kind of a normal state for a lot of people right now. And to make it normal, kind of getting rid of, you did that survey in the beginning, that stigma type of thing, like, hey, you're not alone in this, and let's go ahead and talk about it. And so I think a lot of that just, not making it an elephant in the room, but, just letting them know that I cared about them as a person, and that I knew if they weren't feeling good in their emotional being, that learning was going to be a challenge. And so, I just tried to really, work through that with them through a lot of those things.
That's really great. I love that idea. So is a worksheet that you have part of the class, or is it something you send out?
So I just made the Google worksheet and I posted it in our LMS. So it's an assignment that they do, and they turn it in, and they get full credit for just completing it, and, whatever they want to share. And I tell them, it's up to you what you want to share with me, but, just try, and I give them some ideas on it as well, because maybe they haven't thought about these things, like, do you have an app maybe that helps you with meditation, or, different things like that, and trying to, just have them think about it and let them know that I'm very aware that this is a real problem, and that I still want to help see them be successful in their classes.
I love that. That's
a lot.
Did you find the 4 who didn't respond tended to have issues later, or they just?
Everyone filled out the form. So some of them I knew were going to have struggles, and, we tried meeting, we tried weekly check-ins, we tried creating plans. I tried connecting them to services on campus, but we just couldn't. Their issue was more clinical than what I was able to assist as an instructor. And so it became to the point, like, I'm reaching out to our early intervention team and asking, can you please just make sure this person's alive and well? I'm just worried about their well-being. I'm not worried about academics at this point, but, I don't know where this person is, and I'm very concerned.
That's a great, I love that idea. I might steal that from you, or even make a suggestion. We do something like that college-wide, especially the start of the term. It's a really great tool. And especially if you're giving them points for it.
Yeah.
Encouraging them to do it.
It just lets them know that you think this is important, right? And, then they tend to think about it themselves too. So.
And I think it helps too, because you're establishing yourself early on that you do think it's important. So you you do care and you are someone that they can come to.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think David made a good point. He says that students don't do optional. I've had lots of, we've tried optional, and that, you know, it is, as Marcy said, it's important to know when to refer them and to whom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thought too. Has anybody had issues before in the past where they have referred a student and the student hasn't really taken it very well, or maybe they felt offended by it or felt that you were overstepping? No? I haven't personally, but usually once I refer them, I don't really get information about what happens after that. So we don't really have, I think just because of privacy concerns and things of that nature, I don't get that information often. But there's lots of ways you can incorporate it into your course. Barbara says she had a student who was upset when I told him I needed to refer him. Did you want to share a bit more, Barbara, on what happened?
Well, I'll just say I did wind up referring him because he did seem like he might hurt himself or possibly hurt other people. And so I really felt like there was no choice. But at the same time, I felt that it was important to let him know ahead of time what I was going to be doing and what to expect. And I didn't receive follow-up once he did speak with somebody else on staff. But I just felt like it was a situation where that was the best thing that I could do.
Yeah, it's always better to be safe. You know, we refer them and they get there and they don't need it. And then I know at my institution, we've talked even a whole other discussion, but just if there's any legal issues that come about where a student is saying things where maybe they will hurt themselves or hurt others, and then you don't refer them, and then they do act on it. So we've always followed that if you think it could be something, you're better to speak up and it not be anything, to kind of let it go, and then something actually does happen to that student or someone else. So we've always followed that policy. I do have a lot of references for you to take a look at. I believe, Barbara, these will be available to everyone. Yes?
Yes, I think that you uploaded your slides into the main conference page. And so if folks just click on the title of your presentation toward the bottom of the screen, there'll be a place to download the slides.
Yeah, and all of the one with the strategies, right here, Dugan. Social Emotional Learning Guidebook, Ideas for Incorporating SEL into Your Classroom from Diablo Valley College. So this is an actual PDF guidebook. There's all kinds of strategies. It's a really great tool. It's specifically geared towards faculty. Some of them are ones that are more for on an on-ground classroom, but I think you could easily kind of tweak them a bit so they'd work into either a hybrid or even an online course. And then the rest of the research, all of the statistics I mentioned, everything else, all of that data came from here. So if you want to look further into the reports, it's there. And then if you have any questions or anything, or want to discuss further, you're always welcome to email me. I believe my contact information is available through the listings of the sessions. But thank you, everybody, for, oh yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you for this presentation, and the content is so timely and helpful, and just wanted to, you know, express the importance of these implications of us getting this addressed, quote unquote, you know, because there's different phases. These issues are sort of address SEL in K-12, and then we have this opportunity in higher ed, and the next step is the workforce. And so we owe it to our students to help them to be successful in the workplace, because these behaviors aren't seen as compassionately in the workplace as they are in our classrooms.
No, that's a very good point too. I think that you raised, that it does translate over into once they leave our classrooms and go out into that real world in the workplace. But again, if you have any questions and you want to reach out to me, I can put my email in the chat. Always happy to discuss. And then slides should be available. And I thank all of you for coming and having a wonderful session. It was great to share with you, hear your ideas. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of today's conference.
Thank you so much, everyone. This has been wonderful, Heather, and we hope you have a great rest of your conference.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.